If you've been a follower of this channel, you might already know my love for Grand Theft Auto 4. It isn't just my favorite GTA game, but also my favorite video game of all time. All the new technological advancements and content Rockstar brought into the Grand Theft Auto universe through this game is revolutionary. And this makes it one of the most important, if not the most important game in the entire series. Rockstar's vivid tale of the Niko Bellic, an immigrant with the convictions powerful enough to rocket him through the crumbling substructures of the Liberty City's world of organized crime set in the new standards to storytelling in video games. The Grand Theft Auto franchise rocketed to mass popularity after Grand Theft Auto 3's release. And the ground rules were set for a different take on the open world games. Vice City and San Andreas set those standards even higher with their narrative focused and arcade style gameplay. However, in 2008, Grand Theft Auto 4 came into existence and it represented another step forward in this newly found game genre. This was a game that stripped down a lot of the more zany challenges from the game's past, and you were no longer doing any remote control helicopter missions or lowriding matching challenges. Instead, its focus was on a realism, more mature sensibility, and bringing the iconic Grand Theft Auto franchise into the present day. The game was simply a masterpiece in every way, especially the story. Starting from dealing with your cousin Roman, a small-time operator prone to exaggeration, you'll move up your way through the criminal rings until you get what you actually want. Unlike Grand Theft Auto characters of the past, Niko isn't trying to prove himself as some sort of a badass driven to rule the city no matter what. He's looking for something, and the missions he undertakes are the only way for him to find it. He may perform several ruthless acts, but there are points during the story where you can ease your finger off the trigger or make a choice as to how things to proceed. Despite the fact that the senseless violence tendencies many may associate with Grand Theft Auto characters, Niko represents an exception in many respects, as he has a code by which he operates. The game's infrastructure has been made more convenient, though there is still space for an improvement. Especially the core gameplay experience is refined with how missions work, how the story flows, and the many traveling options you can opt for. If Niko fails a mission, a message asking you to retry is popped up as soon as you respawn, and when you die, you don't lose your entire arsenal. Getting across the gigantic metropolis is made easier by hailing cabs that take you to waypoints on your map. Stealing a car and driving yourself is of course also an option, as this more immersive element of actually driving in a cab's back seat the whole time, staring out the window at the passing lights. For anyone who's short on time or would prefer to forego the random danger of driving across the GTA world, the cabs are certainly welcome. Still, you'll be doing quite a bit of mission restarts, and that often means repeating large chunks of the challenges. Many missions break down into the initial travel segments, some kind of escalation event, a conflict, and an escape. Getting through the on-foot shooting sequences, which has been a real headache with the clunky control schemes of the previous titles, is made much better with the inclusion of the cover system. From behind cover, it's possible to blind fire, rapid pop-out to unload a few shots, or move from cover to cover. A system that doesn't always work perfectly, but it definitely is a step up for the series. Some of the mission structures can be simply impressive and work well in the context of the narrative's direction. But just like the previous titles, there are ways you can still mess up. You could be doing a mission perfectly until you accidentally tap a cop car, unintentionally shoot an item vital to the mission, or misinterpreted a new set of directions that require precise timing upon a mission's phase change, and then it kicks you right back out to try all over again. It is really all up to you to decide how you see them. Some may interpret that as a part of the challenge, but it's rather obvious that it has become a setup to frustrate most of the players, especially the veterans. However, I never saw this as a problem, and I really doubt that most of you did too. The game has introduced an interactive cell phone for the first time in the series. Niko utilizes it as a hub for a wide range of activities. It comes into play during missions for checking messages and talking with the game's vibrant, well-realized NPC population, as well as serving as a tool built to allow players to live Nico's life as if it were a real one. NPCs will call to talk, for instance, with no purpose other than broadening your sense of their character. You can go on dates, organize a game of darts or pool, and manage relationships much as you might outside of the Rockstar's world. Many of these diversions turn out to be fairly tedious after a while, but they're entirely optional, so you can just leave them alone if you prefer. Its main upside is its story, however. The strength of the story and the characters along with the amazingly detailed world is undoubtedly going to make a strong impression on whoever dives into the version of the Liberty City. But we all know that the Grand Theft Auto series has always been about personal moments you experience in the game. Remember that time you went off to the stunt jump and landed on the pedestrians after slamming through the light post with the police choppers crashing to the ground in the background, setting off a string of explosions rocketing through the stalled traffic? This game is also filled with these types of memories waiting for you to be made. Beyond that, there's plenty to discover in Liberty City, a stunningly realized virtual version of the New York City, caked with all the dust, wear and dents you'd expect to see while walking down the actual street. There you can engage in missions, sure, but also immerse yourself in the activities strictly frivolous, from heading to internet shop and clicking through the fictional junk mail, to sitting back in a dimly lit apartment and absorbing the glut of the programs and commercials that in typical Rockstar style wryly torpedo popular culture. Rockstar version of New York has golden sunset, numerous landmarks, and no wasted space. It's a compressed and gorgeous encapsulation of the real thing, a deliberate move away from the simpler styled mass that San Andreas was. Now, the developer went from simple character models and cardboard-looking buildings of the Los Santos to rich HD vision of the GTA in just over 3 years is quite remarkable. In my mind, the only comparable leap in gaming history at the time was GTA 3's transition from 2D to 3D. This city is dazzling. I'm pretty sure all of you have seen New York City in movies or even perhaps in person. If you're familiar with it, you'll instantly realize that Rockstar has nailed the atmosphere, the late 2000s atmosphere to be precise. Algonquin, its version of Manhattan, is still GTA's most dazzling individual area, the looming skyscrapers, the clear artistic difference between the neighborhoods, and the dazing lights of Star Junction, its version of the Times Square. All of these are simply amazing and cozy, to be honest. It has been brought to life so convincingly, and even a decade later, just going for a walk in this place is refreshing and nostalgic in a unique way. And to add to that, the world is populated with the realistic NPCs, and they truly bring life to the game. NPCs can be seen buying and eating food from the street vendors, having conversations on their phone, and running for the cover when the rain starts, even going as far as to shield themselves with newspapers or umbrellas. The autumn air leaves the pedestrians' breath visible as they clutched their arms and shiver greatly, communicating just how cold it is in the Liberty City. Another element that brought life to this gloomy world is the traffic. Traffic builds up to simulate the actual urbanness of the cities. It really feels like taking a trip to the real world of New York City every time I dropped into the world. One tiny detail that I was just blown away by is how traffic in the same lane do not follow the fixed path. Some drivers are actually good at being centered, while others tend to drive close to the dotted lines, giving the city gridlock much appreciated imperfectness. I truly appreciate the vast amount of depth the developers took to breathe the life into Liberty City. The series' staple radio is very much intact in Grand Theft Auto 4. When set against the internet and cell phones, it seems like somewhat more of an anachronism, but it still delivers the game's fantastic soundtrack and a cavalcade of fake talk programs and sarcastic advertisings. This is also one of the main reasons why GTA 4 is extremely addictive. The talk shows broadcasted on the radio networks and the hilarious advertisements make the game's radio bring a whole new layer of the realism and the detail into the world. And the soundtrack is one of the best at the time. It still is in my opinion. Everything from startup music's Soviet Connection by Michael Hunter to most of the tracks on the radio are absolute bangers. However, certain songs from the soundtrack were removed later due to the licensing issues. A large portion of the Russian pop station Vladivostok FM. Still, the game's soundtrack is among the best in the gaming world even today. The excellence in sound implementation doesn't limit to the game's soundtrack. The stellar voice acting throughout the unbelievable amount of the sharply written dialogue manages to convey an extremely thrilling and exciting tale for the audience to enjoy. As you be driving along the introductory sequence of a mission a second time, you'll often be treated to an entirely different and cohesive dialogue thread between the passengers of the vehicle. This will make you realize the length to which Rockstar has worked to fill this world with variety and personality, but it's also etched into every environment, from the snippets of pedestrians to the ambient horns, train track squeals, and general mechanical fuzz that fills big cities that Rockstar managed to capture so very well here, and contributes heavily to the Liberty City's authenticity. Then there is an online play, a major addition to the series. I don't really think Grand Theft Auto 4's online iteration was that successful or even interesting, but it was the first in a series, and it surely was the right step made towards the future, and today we have gotten Grand Theft Auto Online thanks to this. Accessed through the Nico cell's phone, you'll find a wide range of options, from race to death matches to several team-based games with more specific rule sets. It would have been nice to see a few extra cooperative modes instead of those already packaged in the console's version. Even though its multiplayer tech didn't age well, it was still a solid try by Rockstar, at least according to 2008 standards. GTA 4 brought Rockstar's proprietary game engine called Rage to the GTA series for the first time. This new game engine made in-game character animations and other physics simulations look really good. Motion capture used in the animation, almost every animation in the game made sure to look the best in the game world at the time. However, this Rockstar's obsession to get every animation right ultimately led them to cut off a lot of the RPG elements from the game. It was quite surprising how heavily praised features from GTA San Andreas, like shopping for the clothes, working out at the gym, and eating food till you throw up, were removed from the game. But now we know it was partly due to the animation work it would have been required. Another feature in this category that defined the game and the future of the series was its ragdoll physics. Running over the pedestrians and shooting enemies became more fun and interesting mainly because of it. And this game engine also gave a unique feel to it that is not exactly explainable. Everything feels like it has a defined weight in the GTA 4 that drags it down. Nico walks without elegance, always a victim of his lack of balance. Sometimes someone will brush past him or a car will gently tap him and he'll fall over awkwardly. You might crash your car and find Nico flying to his death through the windshield. And when cars crash, you might also notice how they would dent inwards according to the objects you hit. Simple details in physics like these are what made GTA 4 arguably the most important title in the series and defined Rockstar's future open worlds. Now let's dive a little deeper into the quality of the story and how it holds up after 13 years. GTA 4 tells the story of the Niko Bellic, a Serbian war veteran who comes to the city to start a new life. He doesn't try that hard to stay out of the trouble, however, as soon as he's popping heads on behalf of the Russian gangsters and his well-meaning cousin Roman. Well, I remember Niko as being the reluctant criminal pulled back into a life he never asked for. A closer examination in most of the cutscenes suggests he enjoys it on some level, or at least understands it's what he's made for, which is arguably the real tragedy of the character. It was a little earnest as an attempt to infuse extra drama into the series, but Nico is still somewhat easier to like than the Grand Theft Auto V's 3 protagonists. These sincere attempts at character development were certainly not wasted. While GTA 4's cast is still rife with loud-mouthed criminals, you get to see a lot more side to Nico than you did to previous GTA protagonists. These qualities are brought out by his involved relationships with the other characters. While there is inevitably no happy ending for Nico, he's not the only story that Grand Theft Auto 4 tells. The game's brilliant expansion pack, The Lost and the Damned and The Ballad of Gay Tony, were way better valued than anyone could have actually anticipated, possibly as a result of the Microsoft paying a reported $50 million for their temporary exclusivity. Coming back to the story of the main campaign, it is more daft than serious on a moment-to-moment basis than I remember. With a vibrant cast of friends for Nico and a few well-developed villains, Rockstar brought a narrative choices to the series for the first time, including the situation where you decide which of your friends live or die. This was the first time Rockstar had introduced something like that to the series, and it really worked out in my opinion. I recall thinking that these were gimmicky but memorable when I first played GTA 4, but you still don't see them done that frequently or this well in the most modern big games. Importantly, they let you determine Nico's morality, based on your assumptions about who he used to be and who he should become in a new life of Liberty City. I feel like it's easy to be sniffy about the story in the big AAA games, comparing them unfavorably to movies or TV shows. But I simply like the writing and the voice acting in the Grand Theft Auto 4. It dares to take its protagonist seriously, but not too seriously, and asks the player to do the same. Rockstar famously experimented with a friend system in GTA 4, where Nico's pals will call up to hang out. This has been widely mocked for how frequently friends will call up asking you to go bowling or go to the strip club, and often seen as way too needy. But if you really think about it, we should be thanking Rockstar for adding this feature, because at times when you don't want to go on with a lengthy quest, these small activities can come to save the day and keep you entertained. For example, almost all of the minigames were kind of fun to play, and there are sometimes I just found myself spending more time on them rather than actual game and quests. And most importantly, these small dates you make, your bond strengthened with your pals and unveils a lot of other stories and characteristics of them. Some of them even grant you special services like free cab service, combat backup, and etc. You might find it a little annoying at first, but I'm pretty sure you'll get used to it as the game goes on. Like I mentioned earlier, the game is all about the memories you create with, and it surely gives you some good ones to reminisce about for a couple of years. However, it will not give you as fun memories as you had in the previous titles, like spawning a Panzer in the Grand Theft Auto Vice City and blowing up everything. Its realism has made the gameplay too punishing and less chaotic. Part of that comes down to no longer having access to same tools, like the katana, flamethrower, jetpacks, or military aircraft from the past Grand Theft Autos. Nico's got a very conventional set of firearms, and the Molotov cocktail is the only weapon that does anything that exciting. It feels like they want you to focus on Nico's story and exploring the city, and instead of, say, attacking people with a chainsaw for funsies, but having both would have been quite nice. However, the DLC episodes significantly improved that. Satchel charges, automatic shotguns, and pipe bombs add some of that much needed explosion power, and the Ballad of Gay Tony brought in a rocket-equipped helicopter you could nick at any time. The large-scale silliness of Grand Theft Auto 5 and even the thrilling missions of the Ballad of Gay Tony suggest that Rockstar noted that criticism. There were some issues with the game's writing too. There were some homophobic and misogynistic sections that feel juvenile rather than provocative. The game came out back in 2008 when these things weren't as offensive or realized as they are now. But you might be offended by if you try to play it in 2021, especially if you take them seriously. However, the game's ambition and its executions on those ambitions are still unmatched by nearly any other game out there by my measure. Epic in scope and bleak by humanistic, Grand Theft Auto 4 lives beyond these issues as a modern classic in a way that other GTAs just don't. GTA 4 is a 2008 game, and its graphics says it all. Lighting is good, but certainly not great, as it can be a bit unpleasant after coming back from the more modern Rockstar games like Grand Theft Auto 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2. The color palette does leave a bit to be desired, especially with its almost grayscale tone and night setting. But this can be argued as a choice made by the developers to cater to the game's darker narrative, and one does make sense in context. The character model textures on faces and clothing can be horrible to today's eyes, especially during up-close cutscenes, as this may cause to break the immersion. Before concluding this video, let's go over its success and reception. You might not know that it set 3 world records when it released back in the day. Highest grossing video game in 24 hours, highest revenue generated by an entertainment product in 24 hours, and fastest selling video game in 24 hours. It sold over 3.6 million copies worldwide within the first 24 hours, generated approximately $310 million in revenue. The total sales number rose to a whopping 6 million copies within 1 week. It didn't stop there, the number rose to 8.5 million in a month, and it has sold total of more than 22.5 million copies by 2020. I might not need to tell you how well the game was received. People hadn't seen a game as good as this at the time, and just everyone loved it. It was also nominated for multiple awards at multiple events and won a total of 10 awards the year it was released, including the Game of the Year 2008 award by Spike Video Game Awards. You might be wondering why I put this game on top of everything, even after 13 years. Yes, I admit that there are more impressive games out there that deliver even finer gaming experience, including the massive technical and artistic marvel, Grand Theft Auto 5. But hear me out. GTA 4 came out at a time when innovation in gaming was dying and people really loved it for the change and the freedom it brought with the immersive attention to the detail. You couldn't walk up to the brick on the ground, pick it up, throw it at the person in any other game at the time. You didn't see NPCs reacting to the environment that good in any other video games at the time. The technical revolution Grand Theft Auto 4 brought into the GTA series and the gaming universe itself was quite marvelous, and this is why GTA 4 became the all-time favorite for many, including me. Just like the earlier HD games Gears of War and Oblivion, it also showed that the true generation leap was happening in the Grand Theft Auto franchise. GTA 4 essentially ended the era of the clones that followed GTA 3, simply because no one else could make an open world that looked and sounded as Liberty City. Now that I think about it, I actually have a ridiculous number of hours clocked onto the Grand Theft Auto 4 and I just still can't get enough of it. The strongest reminder of Grand Theft Auto 4 is now an old game is that Niko Bellic's phone has buttons on it. Somehow that one little detail and the fact that his mobile phone doesn't have the internet, it just makes this game feel like it came out 100 years ago. I personally really want to see a remaster done for this game, since I want to play it all over again, put in hundreds of hours and revisit it again with the enhanced graphics, visuals, performance and more. Even though everything from its visuals to sound design and core game mechanics still holds up to this day and even outperforms many recent games of this generation. If it somehow were to receive a remaster or a remake, OHA would get a collector's edition including with all the extra goodies that would be included, and no life the game all over again. If you're so far neglected to enter Grand Theft Auto 4's stunning modern metropolis of Liberty City, by all means, I highly recommend you to get this game. The overall Grand Theft Auto formula has been refined and retooled in this version to be more convenient, more realistic, and ultimately more mature, though it lacks some of the cool stuff of the previous titles. As far as living a virtual life goes, managing the social network, nightlife, traveling habits, and explosive forays are virtual dynamo. Niko's story is one that is rarely rivaled and it deserves to be remembered no matter how old the game is. Grand Theft Auto 4 is my favorite game since I have finished the main story more than 15 times. And every time I played the game, it felt like a fresh experience. The small pitfalls this 2008 masterpiece suffers from are not significant enough to discourage you from enjoying it all that it has to offer. Whether it's be your first time or the 10th time, The energy, passion, humor, and all other emotions this game and its beautiful characters bring to you is one of the supreme gaming experiences you will get in your lifetime. Thank you so much for tuning in to this commentary and this big video. Please do consider supporting me on my Patreon. This special video took a very long time to produce and to make. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Lastly, I highly encourage you to check out my full playlist of these similar big videos that I make. They take a lot of time and effort, and I hope that you will at least check them out. So, like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day.